I quietly tiptoed through the hallway as my brother Caleb counted to 20. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Abby, my best friend, ran up to me. She grabbed a hold of me, nearly pushing me into the wall, and whispered, "Emily, where should we hide?" Abby pulled me into the laundry room before I could say anything. "Ready or not, here I come," Caleb yelled, running down the hallway and past the laundry room. Abby and I both hid behind the dryer, struggling to keep our giggles contained. Quiet chuckles escaped from our lips as Caleb rummaged around in closets. I pulled Abby's ear closer. "Let's run to the basement." Abby stepped out from behind the dryer first. There was a door behind me that led into my parents' bedroom. While Abby began to slowly step out of the laundry room, I snuck into my parents' room, closing the laundry room door. "Found you!" I heard Caleb scream. "You're it, Abby!" I ran out of the room and into the hallway to turn on the light. The look on Abby's face made me laugh. Caleb laughed as well and danced around joyously, as he knew he would not have to be it again. He had been it 3 times in a row. Abby looked sternly at me. "Ha, ha, hilarious. You tricked me." "I did not," I retorted with a smile. "I just changed my mind." Abby continued to argue with me. "You know, this isn't the first time you've done that. You should be it." "I am never it. I'm the best when it comes to hide and seek. If anyone wants me to be it, they have to find me first. It's not my fault that I'm so good at the game. My dad even told me that I should get a trophy for my excellent hiding skills. I was simply the best at hide and seek. Everyone knew it. Look, I wasn't caught. You were. You should have heard him coming," I said, defending myself. Abby sighed and placed her hands in her pockets. "I think I should head home. It's getting late." "It's only 5 p.m., Caleb moaned in disappointment. He tried his best to make her stay. Abby smiled at him and ruffled his hair. "I'll be back another day." A small smile adorned her face. "She's just mad," I said to Caleb with a smirk. "Mad? Why would I be mad?" Abby asked. "That I'm the best," I said proudly. Abby rolled her eyes. I thought she'd say something back. I wanted her to, but she just smiled at me and walked away. Not another word was spoken as she grabbed her bag and just left. Abby was mature. She was 2 years older than me. I'm only 14. We argue a lot and then make up. It's our bad habit. We also go to the same school. We became friends by exchanging Nintendo video games and comics. That was when we found out we had a lot in common and became best friends. However, I think she's grown a bit tired of me lately. She doesn't come over as much as she used to, but one thing she can never turn down is a good game of hide and seek in the dark. She gets better and better, though. It's like she practices at home with her parents. Abby left, leaving me and Caleb to wait for Mom and Dad. I was in charge while they were out on their dinner date. Caleb, being only 6, went into his room to play with his toys. He asked me to play with him, but I turned him down. I decided to watch a good scary movie on TV instead. To my luck, a movie called Murder was playing. It's one of my favorite movies. It was about these teenagers that were lost in the woods. They would get murdered if they broke any of the rules they had been given to them by the dwellers of the woods. I sat back and enjoyed the movie, wishing I could play hide and seek in the woods or in a haunted house. That would be so epic, I thought. I woke up around 1 a.m., startled by a noise I heard coming from the hallway. The TV was no longer on. I figured that my parents had turned it off after I'd fallen asleep. I'm surprised they hadn't yet yelled at me for not watching Caleb. I started to get up, but my attention fell onto the lights outside. Flashing blue and red strobes engulfed every object in its wake. I got up to look out the window and saw 2 police cars pulling up in front of my house. "Come out the house!" yelled a man from outside. "We have the place surrounded." Sure enough, more police cars pulled in from the road. My heart started pounding as I heard the sound of 2 unfamiliar voices coming from the hallway. They were getting closer and closer to my room, so I did what I do best. I hid. Seems unfair to save myself, but if you have ever been in a situation like me, you've probably hidden too. I wasn't ready to die. I flinched at the loud crackling sound of gunshots being fired from just outside my door. I heard a cop yell, "Hi, kids!" There were 2 more shots, and then everything went silent. Caleb and I climbed into the back of the police car. The sun hadn't risen yet. I could see the cops moving 2 people out of the house. The 2 bodies were separately strapped onto moving carts and encased inside white body bags. More policemen came out of our house, followed by 2 unfamiliar men that were handcuffed. I got a good look at them. Both were covered in deep red blood splatters. I was hoping to see my parents walk out. Instead, I saw 2 strangers. My parents, however, never walked out of the house. I didn't realize it right away, but I was crying. It hit me all at once. I furiously began beating on the window, which caused Caleb to wake up with a fright. Helpless screams from my parents flew from my mouth. I knew that they were dead now. Caleb was confused and worried. He kept squeezing my arm, calling my name, and begging for me to stop screaming, but I didn't. One of the cops stepped inside the car. In a stern, emotionless tone, he told me to stop yelling and that everything would be okay. I calmed down for his sake as he started up the car and drove away from our home. Caleb grew impatient and pushed me for answers as to what was going on. I didn't answer him, though. I didn't have one that was good enough for him. The only thing that I could do was to wipe my tear-stained face and wait until we arrive at our unknown destination. I was tired. I was cold. I was scared. I sat in a room with a woman and a cop who asked me a million questions. First, they addressed me about the people who broke in last night. The cop told me that I had slept through the whole thing. The 2 men broke in to steal from us. My dad woke up thinking it was probably me or Caleb and was shot by the robbers. My mom called 911, but was shot during the call. Caleb didn't hear anything until the cops came through, just like me. How the hell did they sleep through all of that? Then they told me that the robbers didn't mean to shoot, but once it happened, they really had no other choice but to fire at my mom too. After informing me of all of that, and me crying for another 20 minutes, we talked about my other relatives, the ones who were still alive. The cops had to make a bunch of phone calls because guess what? We had no relatives to live with. My grandma and mother hated each other, so we had no contact with her, ever. She also lived in Alaska, so she really wasn't an option right now. My uncles and aunts weren't stable enough for us to stay with them. I had fallen asleep at the desk. I was awakened by 2 police officers who I was told would be taking me to my new home. My new home, with new foster parents. Apparently, during the hours I was asleep, the cops were able to find someone for us to stay with. The people were on my parents' will. Well, their first will. The police said they had found it in an old suitcase. The new will was never finished, so the cops just went with the old will. Caleb and I would be staying with the Harmons, my mom and dad's old friends. I've heard of these people before. They had gone to school with my parents. I knew their daughter too. I forgot her name, but I remember that we were the same age. They used to come over to our house when I was 6 years old, before Caleb was even born. After that, they never came over again. I wonder why. Now we were about to live with them. The Harmons. Our new family. Of course, we had to pack for the move. I kept some things that belonged to my parents, especially my mother's jewelry. I gave Caleb some of Dad's model cars and a few of his shirts. I don't know who it was harder for, Caleb or me. Our parents had died, and we already had a new family to live with. My mind couldn't process everything that was happening, but I was limited to other options. I couldn't bring my parents back no matter how bad I wanted to. I had to be strong for my brother and for me. Caleb refused to talk. He wouldn't say a word to me or anyone else. He hadn't finished crying about it either. Sometimes he'd cry for 5 whole minutes, then stop, and then cry again for another 20 minutes. I felt so sorry for him, and myself, of course. Abby was sad about me moving away. Saying goodbye to her was so hard. I could barely speak to her or anyone that I said goodbye to. Abby didn't seem that sad about what happened. She said sorry, hugged me, then told me that everything would be okay. There were no tears. There was no sympathy. Living with people that I hadn't seen in ages was not a pleasant compromise for me. They weren't family. They were barely acquaintances. After I had said goodbye to my friends and neighbors, Caleb and I were on our way to our new home. After 2 hours of black tarred roads and 20 minutes of passing nothing but green lands and trees, the car finally turned into a long driveway that led towards a mansion. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was an actual mansion. It was huge, to say the least. A classic blood red and milk white mansion with gold and silver adornments. "What's that?" Caleb asked, while looking out the window. Hearing his voice again made me smile. I was about to tell him that it was a mansion, but that wasn't what he was looking at. Further away from the mansion, in a stalk of tall yellow grass, was another house. Boy, was it creeping me out. It seemed to be an abandoned house. Gray in color. Well, maybe not entirely gray. I couldn't really tell for sure. It was at a pretty far distance. "It's just an old house," I stated reassuringly while placing my arm around him. But he quickly lifted my arm off of him and continued to stare out the window. The car stopped right in front of the middle-aged couple. I guessed that they were them, our new foster parents. It killed me to say that. As Caleb and I stepped out, the woman ran over to hug us. "Emily! Caleb! You two have grown up so much!" Her voice bubbly and high as she stretched her words with what seemed to be plastered on affection. She took one long look at us before wrapping her arms around our bodies in another embrace. Her husband, Mr. Harmon, gathered our belongings from the car and thanked the policeman. As the Harmons were oohing and awing over Caleb, I studied them. The woman had short, straight black hair that covered one of her eyes. A light pink bow rested amongst the black mass. It was cute. She had brown eyes, a small nose, and very thin lips. Her skin was pale, but not overwhelmingly so. She wore a sleeveless yellow dress and a pair of flip-flops. Mr. Harmon, on the other hand, was a man probably in his 30s or 40s, but it seemed as if he had just turned 25. He had brown curly hair that reached the creases of his bright blue eyes. Faint freckles lined the bridge of his nose and scattered across his face. He had perfect cheekbones and a huge mouth with perfect teeth. He wore a pair of dark blue shorts and a gray sports shirt. Yet, something was missing. Oh, yes, the daughter. Where's your daughter?" I asked. Suddenly, their gazes were glued to me. They froze completely, and Mr. Harmon's smile slowly sculpted itself into a frown. He then smiled for a quick second before chuckling.
She won't be here."
I waited for a more coherent answer, but that was all I got. "Oh," I merely stated. Mrs. Harmon grabbed the suitcases, followed by Mr. Harmon, and then led us inside. Mr. Harmon asked Caleb if he liked scooters. My brother answered enthusiastically, and the objects which instantly caught our attention were 2 brand new scooters stood in front of us. The scooters were beautiful, but honestly, they could never compare to the immaculate mansion that surrounded us. Even Caleb gasped. The inside was so enormous and fancy.
"Your rooms aren't quite done yet, but please feel free to take a ride around. There's so much to explore," Mr. Harmon happily said. "Unless you're tired, then you can sleep in our bed."
Caleb ran over to the silver scooter. I saw him smiling, and it made me grin like a buffoon. I looked over my shoulder to see the Harmons whispering to each other, nodding in agreement.
Once they noticed that I was looking at them, Mrs. Harmon cleared her throat and walked over to me. She rested her hand on my shoulder.
Although we ask that you please follow just one rule, she pointed upwards. See the 4th floor, which is also the last floor of this house?
Both Caleb and I nodded wearily.
Mr. Harmon's life work is up there, so no one is allowed on the 4th floor. There is also expensive artwork up there, and if anything gets ruined, well, that's a lot of money lost.
Sure enough, sculptures decorating the halls and paintings hung along the walls. There were all kinds of amazing art pieces that added to the excellent feeling of the mansion. Caleb and I promised to never go up there. Well, good, Mr. Harmon said. You two get some rest and go and play while we get your rooms together. Some workers will be here later to paint and do some redecorating in your room, Caleb, since it's filled with girl stuff.
Mr. Harmon cleared his throat again, suddenly very cautious of his next words.
Some of my wife's stuff. Before I could say anything, Caleb began to ride around the house. I called after him.
Caleb, wait!
Telling him to wait for me, but he was already gone. I wanted to explore the new house with him, but I wasn't ready to leave him alone. Not again. I thanked the Harmons, hopped onto the motorized scooter, and followed Caleb around our new house.